Hello my friends, it's Gabriel with The Last Huntsman Outdoors here. We're doing part 2 of the Big Knife Showdown. Now, a couple caveats here. One, I don't have every big knife that I could possibly test out, so if you got some other suggestion, thank you. But, you know, I don't have access to every single knife. I don't have money for every single knife. Also, every single knife here is a great knife. I highly suggest every single knife here, quite frankly. And so if any of these just for whatever reason really trips your trigger, go ahead and grab it, because I suggest every single knife here. We'll just kind of go through the list of the knives real quick, and then we'll get started on part 2. This is going to be the chopping test. Now, also another little caveat here with the chopping test. I am not counting the amount of chops I do, because I feel like that actually kind of has some flaws with that method of considering how good something chops, because I could always kind of miss and be off center and such. And so to me, I don't feel like that's a fair way to test chopping. I feel like the more fair way to do it, at least for me anyways, is to see how efficiently it gets through and based on how much time it takes. And so that's how I'll be testing these. Knives will be the Yukari or the Tarava Scrama 240, the Mineral Mountain Hatchet Works Bull Nozer, the Work Tough Gear V44X, the Becker BK9, and the SE hungus. So let's go ahead and get started on these. Starting here with the Scrama 240. Now the wood I'm chopping into is a piece of cedar. Let's start this. Under a minute, which for that thick of wood is pretty good. All right, another little caveat I'm going to throw out here too is in between each chop, I'm going to, or not each chop, but every session of chopping with each knife, I'm going to give myself about 3 to 5 minutes of break, just so my arm is about as consistent as possible. I'm not saying that this is going to be the most scientific test possible. I'm just a guy out here in the woods having fun, so take that as you will. All right, next on chopping, we have the Mineral Mountain Hatchet Works Bull Nozer. This is a hunky chunky piece of steel here. Let's see what it can do. Ooh. This thing's beating the crap out of my hand with that just metal bird's beak right there without any grip on there. finally. So, this knife's the heaviest knife here, but we'll say some of the handle ergonomics was really messing with me. Well, here, I'll just... Well, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but this end part here was really just beating the crap out of my pinky finger. This was not exactly fun to chop with, to be totally honest. And I kind of feel like this doesn't have the best edge on it. But yeah, seen how it did. Let's move on to the next one. Just use an axe! Just use an axe! Just use an axe! Next up, we have the Work Tough Gear V44X. Go ahead and see what it takes for this knife. Right at about a minute. Yeah, pretty decent in the way the handle ergonomics are. I could have just choked it back just like kind of like another knife we'll see. And yeah, this one, I feel like it did pretty good. We'll move on to the next. All right, another little side note here. Obviously, I'm never going to have the exact same type of wood, so there's a lot of variables here, so just take this all with a grain of salt, okay? Also, obviously, the base of the tree is going to be a little thicker than the top of the tree, but that's why I'm trying to do just short little increments here, just so it's as close as possible. It's never going to be perfect, but let's move on to the next knife. All right, next I have the Becker BK9. This is one of the smaller knives here, but as we've seen, just because it's bigger and heavier doesn't mean it always performs better. So let's give this one a go. Well, the Becker got through it a little more than a minute, but I did talk a little bit, so we'll kind of have to figure up the rough time span afterwards. But honestly, I think the Becker, the biggest thing that has an advantage with it is obviously it has a high saber grind, but that handle, just kind of like the V44, or I guess the V44 is kind of like this, is you really can choke back on it and just get full power with that handle. Pretty decently impressed with the Becker, especially for the size of it. Last but not least, here I have the SE hungus. Let's give it a go here. Pretty quick with the SE hungus, for sure. Pretty impressed. All right. Now that we're done with our hopping showdown part here, I'm going to score each one of these. And I'm going to take a few things in consideration. One, I think time is going to be one thing. But I did kind of talk some, and, you know, it's not going to be the only thing. I'm also going to score it on a few different bases here, like efficiency and how easy it was to do type of thing too. So the first one we did was the Tarava Scrama 240. Now, I think one of the things that really gave this knife an advantage is because it has that super elongated handle. I mean, this knife can actually, because of that super long handle, kind of really outperform its weight class. This knife, it's only about a 9-inch blade, but as we can see, the handle is a good inch or two longer than most of these other knives, and that really does make a difference. And honestly, when you really are choking back on it, it feels almost like an axe. I feel like this is one of our best performers, and you know, this is one that honestly continues to surprise me, and it surprised me the most out of this whole chopping portion here. So I can't help but not give this knife a solid 10, honestly, for chopping. Now, I still think it did pretty good, but this bull noser, I feel like I had to put a lot more work into this knife, honestly. And with that part right there, that was just beating the absolute piss out of my pinky. I feel like if they'd made that micarta come all the way down and around, or even like at least around this part, it would have been a lot better. It wouldn't have battered my pinky like that. But because it was, and it was not very comfortable to like choke back on it like I was like the Beckers and other knives, that was just beating the crap out of my pinky. And I don't even feel like it did the best, quite frankly. So out of this whole chopping portion, I hate to do it because I like the knife design. I think it's cool overall, but I'm keeping it real with you guys. I think I'm only going to give this one, I think I'm going to give it a solid 5 out of 10. Next, the V44X. This thing hit pretty good, and honestly, it was very comfortable to use. I didn't feel fatigued by using it at all, just like the Tarava Scrama. This didn't fatigue me at all, and you know, it was just a pleasure to keep using it. I choked back on it just kind of like I did the BK9, and you know, I feel like it did very similar to the Tarava. So I think I'm also going to give it a 10. BK9. So this is the lightest blade here. It did pretty good for its weight class. But this blade, as you guys can see, is significantly smaller than these other ones here. So oddly, this one being so small, it still, I feel, outperformed the bull noser. And the handle is, of course, just a dream to use on a Becker knife. But I don't think it performed as good as the V44X or the Tarava. I think I'm going to give it a solid 8, though. And finally, we have the SE hungus. Always a solid performer. I enjoy using the SE hungus. It chopped very well, and honestly, I feel like these three here are very well tied for how good they can chop. I think they all kind of offer a little bit different pros and cons. I think I'm going to give it a score. Man, it's kind of hard to do this when they all did pretty well, honestly. So I might have to kind of like really nitpick here. But I think I'm going to give it a solid 9. I think it did very well, but I don't think it did quite as good as these two. But that is, and also something else to kind of take note on is this had a slightly thinner piece to chop through than these two, and it took about the same amount of time. So that is something else to consider. But all that being said, I think every single knife here is a great knife. Stay tuned for the next part of the Big Knife Showdown. With all that being said, be prepared both physically and spiritually. God bless. Carry on.